Hello, I'm Simon Whistler, you're watching the Today I Found Out YouTube channel, and in the video today we're looking at why New York City is called the Big Apple. Thanks to extensive research done by esteemed etymologist Barry Popick, we know that the earliest documented reference to New York being referred to as the Big Apple comes from a 1909 book by Edward Martin called The Wayfarer. In it, he uses the moniker in a metaphorical sense rather than a proper name for the city. Kansas is apt to see New York a greedy city. It inclines to think that the Big Apple gets a disproportionate share of the national sap. The next known documented instance of New York being called the Big Apple comes from sports writer John J. Fitzgerald, who began popularizing the name starting on May 3rd, 1921, where he wrote in a column, J.P. Smith with Tippity Witchett and others of the L.T. Bower string is scheduled to start for the Big Apple tomorrow after a most prosperous spring campaign at Bowie and Harvard Grace. In this case, he was referencing the early 1920s practice of calling certain racecourses in the New York City region this particularly fruity name. The New York City races tended to pay out significant prizes to the winner compared to races in many other regions, hence Big Apple. According to linguist Dr. Gerald Cohen, this wasn't out of the ordinary, even outside of horse racing. As he states, apples were important throughout history, but the big red delicious apples developed in Iowa in the 1870s came to be regarded as extra special. This led to the Big Apple being applied to things and people who were extra special, or perhaps only thought they were. As applying this to New York City, it's thought that Fitzgerald didn't come up with this on his own, but rather heard it from people from New Orleans in 1920 when he traveled down to that city to supposedly sell one of his horses, with the common tale being that it came from a couple of stable hands. Fitzgerald explicitly mentions this 3 years later in his 1924 column Around the Big Apple, though it's possible he just made the story up. The Big Apple, the dream of every lad that ever threw a leg over a thoroughbred and the goal of all horsemen. There's only one Big Apple, that's New York. Two dusky stable hands were leading a pair of thoroughbred around the cooling rings of adjoining stables at the fairgrounds in New Orleans and engaging in desultory conversation. "Where y'all going from here?" queried one. "From here, we're headed to the Big Apple," proudly replied the other. "Well, you better fatten up them skinners, or all you get from the apple will be the core," was the quick rejoinder. The nickname for New York City gradually caught on and began being used in a non-sporting sense, including a popular song and dance coming out in the 1930s called The Big Apple, as well as numerous references in other songs, particularly in jazz music. However, this nickname for the city died off by the 1960s, and few outside of the city would have understood the reference had you used it then. That all changed in the 1970s when Charles Gillette and the New York Convention and Visitors Bureau decided to revive the nickname. This was part of an advertising campaign in which they were aggressively advertising New York City as a tourist hotspot and referred to it as the Big Apple, using bright, clean-looking red apples in their advertisements. This was to contrast the very popular notion of the day that New York was a dirty place where you were likely to be the victim of a crime. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We put out brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, over there on the right, a couple of other videos that you might enjoy if you enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.